7-year-old daughter off the dance floor at my brother-in-law's high society wedding. In front of 100 guests, her voice boomed. No child of a low-class soldier ruins my son's perfect day. Get this soldier's brat out of my sight. Everyone gasped, but nobody stopped her. They just stared at me, expecting a broken, humiliated military spouse to pack her bags and cry. Even my mother-in-law's lawyer looked at me with cold pity. What none of them knew, what my husband's arrogant family completely failed to research, was that I wasn't just a trailing spouse waiting for a deployment check. 2 hours later, the police met me at the ER. 1 hour after that, she saw my pristine Air Force dress blues and whispered, "They said a colonel was coming. That's you?" Follow my story so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Clara, and at 29 years old, I have spent the last 7 years of my life mastering the art of keeping a straight face in the middle of a storm. When I married my husband, I knew I wasn't just marrying him. I was marrying his family's elite social standing, their massive real estate empire, and their absolute obsession with appearances. My mother-in-law, Victoria, made it her life's mission to ensure I always felt like an outsider who had somehow stumbled into a world she didn't belong in. Because my husband and I chose to keep my professional life completely separate from their exhausting family drama, Victoria built her own narrative about who I was. To her, I was just a quiet, unassuming military dependent. She assumed I was married to a low-ranking enlistee, living paycheck to paycheck, and contributing absolutely nothing of value to society. She constantly dropped my lifestyle, openly mocking the sacrifices it required and treating my career like an embarrassing little hobby. Little did she know, the quiet discipline she mistook for weakness was actually the commanding, poised presence of a leader. I wore my silence like armor, letting her believe whatever lies comforted her fragile ego, because I knew that true power never needs to scream to be heard. I chose to stay quiet to keep the peace for my daughter's sake, giving up my own comfort to protect a family that didn't deserve it. But there is a very fine line between patience and tolerance, and Victoria was about to cross it. The grand ballroom of the country club was suffocatingly opulent, completely filled with the city's most prominent families, corporate executives, and high-priced lawyers. It was my brother-in-law's wedding day, and Victoria was entirely in her element, gliding across the polished floor in a designer gown, desperately bragging to anyone who would listen about her family's wealth and spotless reputation. My 7-year-old daughter, Lena, was a vision of pure innocence in her little white dress, her face lighting up with absolute joy as she danced to the music. But in a room dictated by cold perfection, a child's genuine happiness was a liability. As Lena turned, her foot caught the edge of a massive, heavily weighted floral pillar, causing it to wobble slightly. Victoria materialized instantly, her face distorted with a terrifying, venomous rage. Before I could even cross the room, she grabbed my sobbing daughter by her tiny arm, dragging her violently off the dance floor. In front of 100 staring guests, Victoria's voice boomed across the silent room like a thunderclap. No child of a low-class soldier ruins my son's perfect day. Get this classless soldier's brat out of my sight. The cruel words echoed off the high ceilings, striking Lena like a physical blow. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the ballroom as elite guests gasped, but not a single person stepped forward to stop her. They simply stared at me with cold pity, fully expecting a humiliated military spouse to break down in tears, pack her bags, and flee into the night. Even my husband stood completely frozen, too intimidated by his mother's wealth and dominance to speak a single word in defense of his own flesh and blood. As Victoria forcefully yanked Lena away from the dance floor, her aggressive movement caused the heavy floral pillar to lose its balance completely. It came crashing down, the sharp decorative metal edges scraping violently against my daughter's delicate forearm, leaving a deep, bleeding gash surrounded by immediate bruising. Lena's terrified screams shattered the stunned silence of the room, instantly breaking through the icy shock that had held me paralyzed. I swept my sobbing daughter into my arms, holding her tightly against my chest as I marched past my silent husband and his horrified, hypocritical family without uttering a single word. We drove straight to the nearest emergency room, the heavy silence in the car only broken by my daughter's soft, painful whimpers. While the medical staff gently cleaned and bandaged her injury, a local police officer arrived at the hospital to take a detailed report of the venue incident. The nurse had automatically flagged the injury as a potential case of child endangerment due to Victoria's reckless actions. As I calmly explained the situation, the officer's professional demeanor shifted from routine questioning to absolute attention the moment he recognized my name and realized the high-ranking military official involved. He assured me a full investigation would be launched immediately, documenting every single scrape and bruise for the official record. I sat under the harsh hospital lights, watching my brave little girl finally drift off to sleep, feeling a cold, unbreakable resolve settling deep into my bones. Victoria thought she had successfully put a low-class dependent in her place, completely unaware that she had just initiated a chain of events that she couldn't possibly stop. While my daughter rested peacefully under the crisp white hospital sheets, my phone began to buzz insistently in my palm. The caller ID displayed an encrypted line from the Air Force Base, shattering the sterile quiet of the room. It was an urgent call from General Vance regarding an upcoming multi-agency protocol meeting scheduled for early the next morning. This wasn't just any routine briefing. It was the final, critical evaluation involving local city officials to award a massive multi-million-dollar government development contract. For the past 6 months, Victoria's prominent real estate firm had been desperately pulling every high society string imaginable, begging for just a seat at that table. They had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in preparation, knowing this single contract could either cement their legacy or bankrupt them entirely. The general's voice was sharp as he gave me the final briefing, completely unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded at the country club. He reminded me that the local civilian contractors were eagerly waiting to pitch their proposals to the newly appointed base authority. As I listened quietly, a sudden, chilling realization washed over me. The elusive, high-ranking colonel that Victoria and her elite circle of greedy executives had been frantically trying to butter up and impress for months wasn't a stranger at all. It was me. I calmly confirmed the meeting time, hung up the phone, and looked down at my sleeping daughter, knowing exactly what my next move had to be. I stepped out of the hospital elevator and walked with absolute purpose toward the private conference room at Morrison and Associates. Inside, Victoria, her high-priced corporate lawyer, and several nervous city officials were gathered around a massive glass table, frantically checking their watches. They were desperately waiting for the arrival of the newly appointed base commander who held the fate of their real estate empire in her hands. Victoria was in the middle of complaining to her lawyer about how a dramatic family incident had nearly ruined her night when the heavy double doors clicked open. The room fell into an instant, suffocating silence as I marched inside. I wasn't wearing the casual civilian clothes from the wedding anymore. I was wearing my immaculate Air Force dress blues. The pristine dark blue fabric, the razor-sharp creases, the silver insignias of a full colonel gleaming on my shoulders, and the rows of highly decorated service medals on my chest radiated absolute, undeniable authority. Victoria's smug, arrogant smile completely evaporated from her face, turning into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Beside her, her lawyer took one look at my rank, recognized the terrifying legal reality of the situation, and turned completely pale, his hands shaking as he dropped his gold pen onto the table. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Victoria finally found her voice, her throat dry as she stared at the woman she had publicly humiliated just hours before. She gripped the edge of the table, leaned forward, and desperately whispered, "They said a colonel was coming. That's you?" I looked directly into Victoria's wide, terrified eyes and pulled a chair out at the head of the table, the heavy silence in the room emphasizing every deliberate movement I made. "Yes, Victoria," I said, my voice carrying the calm, razor-sharp authority that had been forged through years of military command. "The colonel is here, and it is time we discuss the practical matters of this contract." Her lawyer tried to step forward, desperately shuffling through a thick leather folder to present their grand real estate proposal, but I raised a single hand to cut him off instantly. I opened my own briefcase and slid a copy of the official police report from the emergency room across the polished glass table, right into the center of their pristine documents. Effective immediately, the United States Air Force is formally denying your firm's application for this development project, it announced smoothly. Under federal procurement regulations, we do not partner with organizations led by individuals who demonstrate severe behavioral liabilities, lack basic ethical standards, and are currently under active police investigation for criminal child endangerment. Victoria's face flushed with a mixture of panic and desperation as she realized her multi-million-dollar empire was crumbling right before her eyes. She leaned over the table, her voice trembling as she tried to use family ties to save herself, whispering that we could settle this quietly at home. I looked at her with cold indifference and reminded her that she had made her choice clear when she dragged a child off the dance floor. Her lawyer looked utterly defeated, silently closing his briefcase as he realized there was no legal loophole or high society connection that could ever save them from the consequences of her cruelty. In the weeks following that fateful meeting, the fallout from Victoria's actions rippled through her entire world. With a lucrative government contract permanently denied, her real estate firm's financial stability collapsed like a house of cards, forcing them to liquidate key assets just to stay afloat. The high society elite who had once eagerly courted her favor suddenly distanced themselves, completely unwilling to be associated with a family under active police investigation. But the most profound change happened right inside my own home. After witnessing the absolute strength and undeniable authority I carried, my husband finally found his backbone, breaking away from his mother's suffocating manipulation to stand fiercely by his wife and daughter. Lena's arm healed perfectly, her bright smile returning as she realized she was completely safe and fiercely protected. Looking back, I realized that keeping my true identity hidden wasn't a mistake. It gave me the ultimate clarity to see exactly who people were when they thought I was powerless. This journey taught me that hiding my rank wasn't a mistake. It was the only way to see my in-laws' true colors. But now the floor is yours. Would you have exposed the truth the moment she laid a hand on Lena, or was walking into that boardroom in full dress blues the ultimate revenge? Leave a I can see where my audience is tuning in from. There are 2 more mind-blowing stories waiting for you on the screen right now, so click one and keep watching. Thank you.